The moment the new COO called the security team a liability, Chen knew she had a front-row seat to a slow-motion train wreck. She was sitting 4 chairs down from him, silently watching him throw around phrases like streamlined threat posture and zero trust light with the confidence of a man who had just discovered the word cybersecurity existed. No one nodded except his assistant. He grinned like he'd just invented the password. What nobody in that glass and steel fortress of a boardroom understood, least of all the COO in his Patagonia vest and founder mode haircut, was that Maya was not just part of the team, she was the team. 12 years, 4 funding rounds, 2 ransomware attempts, 1 nation-state probe that never made the news because Maya had buried it before the board even finished their breakfast. She didn't chase headlines or post thought leadership on LinkedIn, but she could trace a packet through a compromised network the way a surgeon traces a vein, quietly, precisely, without ever letting anyone bleed out. Her workstation was a controlled chaos of terminal windows, threat logs, and sticky notes color-coded in a system only she fully understood, each one a crisis she had quietly diffused before it became a headline, before it became a leak, before it became a lawsuit. But now the golden boy from McKinsey was here to optimize the org chart. Translation, cut the departments he didn't understand. And Maya, who had built the company's entire security infrastructure from scratch, who held every federal compliance certification their enterprise clients demanded, who was the sole registered administrator across 3 government-linked contract systems, wasn't even CC'd on the new roadmap emails anymore. She watched week after week as her name quietly vanished from architecture reviews. No more threat briefings with the CTO, no more pre-contract security walkthroughs with legal. Her role had become background noise, just ambient hum in the walls, until the day it wasn't. Before we go any further, can I ask you something small? If this story is hitting different, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe right now. Seriously, most people forget, and it genuinely keeps this channel alive. All right, back to Maya and the implosion nobody saw coming. It started with small things. Her team's cloud security budget was quietly redirected to a new AI features sprint. A junior developer was assigned to shadow her, which mostly meant he asked her where to get good ramen near the office. Her quarterly penetration testing review got moved, then moved again, then quietly absorbed into a general ops meeting she wasn't invited to. Maya found out from a calendar notification forwarded by accident. Wrong Maya, wrong department, same catastrophic oversight. Then came the restructuring, or as the COO preferred to call it, the talent realignment. Engineering lost 1/3 of its headcount overnight. Product and design were merged into a single pod. The Slack workspace started to feel like an airport after a canceled flight. People standing around, confused, waiting for someone to tell them what was happening next. The ping-pong table gathered dust, the cold brew keg went dry, and nobody refilled it. One engineer, Raj from Platform Infrastructure, left a succulent on his monitor and a rubber duck on his keyboard and never logged in again. Maya stayed quiet. She did what she always did. Woke up early, stayed late, kept the threat dashboards clean, made sure nobody accidentally left a door open to the outside world. Because behind all the pivot decks and OKR workshops, her fingerprints were on everything that actually kept the company standing. She held the SOC 2 Type 2 certification that every enterprise client required before signing. She maintained the FedRAMP authorization that gave them access to government contracts, a designation tied personally to her name, her training, and her federal registration. She had written the incident response playbook in 2019 after a previous CISO handed her a 12-page Word doc and said, "Good luck." She had rebuilt it from zero into something that actually worked. She had also quietly prevented a breach in 2021 that would have exposed 4.3 million user records. She never told anyone how close it had been. She just fixed it, documented it internally, and went back to her desk. But to the new COO, Maya was overhead, a legacy layer, someone whose entire function could be replaced with a managed security service provider and a chatbot for ticket triage. He didn't understand what her credentials meant. Not decorative, not symbolic, they were federally registered, personally tied, and legally binding across every enterprise and government contract the company had ever signed. There was no backup, no second key, no understudy waiting in the wings. But he wouldn't learn that today or tomorrow. Maya wasn't going to stop the train wreck, she was going to let it happen. And when the alarms started screaming and everyone was asking how they missed it, she'd already be gone. Badge on the desk, laptop returned, and the entire digital infrastructure of the company humming along like a ticking clock with nobody left who knew how to read it. Because Maya didn't want revenge, she had something better: architecture, weaponized. He said it like he was announcing happy hour. Your functions being transitioned to a managed provider, Maya, effective end of the month. Right there in the middle of a cost efficiency review, wedged between a slide on eliminating redundant SaaS subscriptions and a comment about using contractors for QA. The room chuckled nervously, the way people do when they sense danger but don't know which direction it's coming from. Maya didn't react, not when he waved his hand like he was clearing smoke and said, "We've selected a vendor with 24/7 global coverage and a more scalable security footprint," not when he gave her that particular smile, the one CEOs in training practice in elevator mirrors. She just looked at him, steady, still, and reached into her bag. He kept talking, because men like him always do. "Of course, we appreciate everything you've built here, Maya. This is truly about the company's next phase. Your contributions have been foundational, but we need to move fast now. Managed security is just the smarter play going forward." That's when she placed it on the table. Her access credential card, matte black, federally issued, embossed with a seal that nobody in that room could identify, clipped to a yellow lanyard that read "Authorized System Owner, FedRAMP Designated Representative." It didn't flash, it didn't beep, it just sat there with the quiet menace of a thing that knew more than everyone in the room combined. The VP of Product stopped mid-sip. The head of finance leaned slightly forward. The COO looked at it like it was a weird piece of modern art he didn't understand but didn't want to admit. "Oh, is that your protest piece, Maya? Leaving the badge on the table? Very dramatic." Maya looked up, flat, calm. "It's not a protest, it's a handoff." "Come on," he leaned back, unbothered. "It's just a card. Our new vendor will handle all of this. You made the security thing sound way more complicated than it is." And there it was, the sentence that sealed it. Maya gave him one slow nod, the kind you give someone right before the universe decides to teach them something expensive. She turned to the head of legal, a woman named Diana who had been quietly stress-eating a granola bar in the corner, and handed her a USB drive. Full offboarding documentation, credential transfer logs, active contract dependencies, unresolved security tickets, and a complete map of every system currently tied to my personal authorization. You'll want to start there. Diana took it with the energy of someone accepting a live grenade. "Your new vendor will need to begin federal re-registration immediately. The FedRAMP authorization window doesn't pause. You have a 30-day remediation buffer. After that, it's automatic non-compliance." Silence crept through the room like cold air under a door. The COO smiled, still performing. "Maya, relax. We'll be fine. Honestly, this might be good for you. Take some time, decompress, maybe go to Napa or something." Maya stood, straightened her jacket, and pushed her chair neatly under the table. "Good luck," she said. "Just make sure your new vendor has a FedRAMP jab authorization. It's not something you can fake." She walked out, clean, no scene, no tears, just the soft click of her shoes on the polished concrete floor, steady as a countdown. Behind her, the COO looked at the room and said, "She'll be consulting for a competitor by next week." Nobody laughed, because nobody in that room could actually explain what FedRAMP was, or what Maya had just handed them, or any of it meant for the contracts they'd signed and the clients they'd promised security to. They just stared at the card on the table, quiet, still,
already doing its damage. Maya reorganized her home office on Saturday morning with the efficiency of someone who had spent 12 years building systems that didn't tolerate disorder. She wasn't grieving, she wasn't raging, she was methodical, which, if you knew Maya, was the most dangerous thing she could possibly be. She powered up her personal terminal and began the process she had planned for weeks. She revoked her administrative credentials across every company system: the SIEM platform, the Cloud Security Posture Tool, the FedRAMP authorization dashboard, the SOC 2 audit portal, the vulnerability management system, and the Zero Trust policy console she had configured from scratch in 2020. Each one was logged, each one time-stamped, each one perfectly, legally clean. The system didn't ask her why, it just processed the commands with the indifference of software that doesn't know what it's losing. Are you sure you want to revoke all active tokens for...
She didn't click it. She put the phone face down, watched the lights of the valley blur through the mist, and sat quietly with the knowledge that the next few business days were going to be very educational for a lot of people who had stopped paying attention. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was pressurized. Monday morning. The founder, Daniel Park, was at his standing desk by 6:48 a.m. That alone was unusual enough to make his assistant do a double-take. Daniel was famously, almost defiantly, a 9:15 arrival. He ran on green juice and late-stage capitalism, and he liked to say he did his best thinking after the commute traffic cleared. But today, he was in before the cleaning crew finished, and he was holding a printed email the way you hold something that had bitten you. By 7:03, he had called the CEO into his office. By 7:11, the head of legal, Diana, was there too, still in yesterday's blazer because she had never actually gone home. The email was from their largest government client. Subject: authorization verification required, immediate response requested. The message was 3 paragraphs of controlled federal language that translated very simply to, "Your compliance credentials don't check out. Explain yourself before we freeze the contract." Daniel put the email on the desk between them. The CEO read it, looked up. "This is about Maya's exit?" "This is about whatever Maya's exit broke," Daniel said. By 8:30, the COO arrived wearing a pressed linen shirt and the expression of someone who had already decided this was someone else's problem. He barely got through his coffee order before Daniel walked into the boardroom and closed the door. "Walk me through the Maya decision," Daniel said. The COO opened his hands like he was presenting something obvious. "We were overpaying for a function we can outsource for a fraction of the cost. The MSSP we've contracted is a top-tier provider. Maya made the role seem more complicated than it was. This is standard operating procedure for a company at our growth stage." Daniel put the printed email in front of him. The COO read it, chuckled slightly. "This is just a system lag. Give it a few days to update." That was the moment the VP of Engineering spoke up. His name was Tom Reyes, and he looked like he hadn't slept since Thursday. "It's not a lag," Tom said. "I've been in the system since 5 a.m. Maya's credentials are revoked across everything, and I mean everything. The FedRAMP dashboard requires her designation to authorize our current government contract status. Without an active, federally registered system owner, our authorization is considered lapsed." The COO stared at him. "So reassign it. Point it at someone else." Tom looked at him the way engineers look at non-engineers who suggest things that are not how things work. "You can't just reassign a FedRAMP authorization. It requires federal review, background investigation in a minimum 60-day processing window. We don't have 60 days. Our DoD contract renewal is in 22 days. The room went quiet. Diana from legal finally spoke. "Maya told us this in the security architecture review in Q3 last year. She submitted a written brief on authorization continuity risk." The COO glanced at her. "I don't recall seeing that." Diana said, "You were at a leadership offsite in Scottsdale. It was in your inbox. It had a red flag in the subject line." The founder looked at the COO. slowly, the kind of look that doesn't need volume. The COO shifted in his chair. Look, we can reach out to Maya, offer her a consulting contract, short-term bridge, keep things running while we transition. Diana opened her laptop and turned it around. A single email on the screen, sent Sunday at 9:17 p.m. Maya's formal notice of complete disassociation from the company, copied to the FedRAMP Joint Authorization Board, the Department of Defense Contract Liaison, the SOC 2 audit body, and their 3 largest enterprise clients. She already filed it. With everyone, Diana said. Daniel read it slowly, then sat back and rubbed his face with both hands. She knew we'd try to pull her back, he said quietly. Diana nodded. She made sure there was no back to pull to. The COO looked at the email, then at Daniel, then at Tom. I mean, surely one of the engineers can temporarily cover the... It's a federal designation, not a JIRA ticket. The room didn't laugh. It just deflated. Outside in the hall, 2 engineers exchanged a look. One mouthed, "Told you," the other just shook his head and walked slowly back to his desk. By 10:15 a.m., the first enterprise client had called. Not emailed, called, which in B2B software is the equivalent of someone showing up at your house. It was NovaBridge Financial, one of their anchor clients, a company that processed billions in institutional transactions and took their vendor security posture with the kind of seriousness that came with billion-dollar liability exposure. Their CISO was calm but direct. "We've run our vendor verification this morning, and your FedRAMP authorization status is showing a compliance gap. Our contractual terms require continuous authorization. Can you confirm your current system owner status?" The CEO, who had taken the call, said they were in a transition period and actively resolving the matter. The CISO paused. "I'll need written confirmation of your acting authorization owner within 4 hours, or we'll be required to initiate our vendor suspension protocol." The call ended. The CEO stared at his phone. By 11 a.m., 2 more enterprise clients had sent formal inquiries. One had already forwarded the matter to their own legal team. By noon, the managed security provider they'd contracted to replace Maya sent their own message. They did not hold FedRAMP authorization. They had assumed that was already in place on the client side. They were regrettably unable to bridge the authorization gap. They wished the company well. The COO read that one twice. Then he got very quiet. Tom from engineering tried to access the vulnerability management console to at least generate a status report for clients. Locked. Maya's admin key had been the root of the encryption chain. He tried the incident response platform. Same result. He tried the SOC 2 audit log. Also locked. Not deleted, not destroyed, just sealed behind a credential that no longer existed in the company's possession. The systems were all still there, intact, breathing, fully operational. They just required an owner, and the owner had left. By 2 p.m., Tom gave the executive team the full assessment. His voice was flat. He'd moved past panic into that engineer's state of eerie calm where everything is simply a problem set. "The good news," he said, "is Maya didn't sabotage anything. The infrastructure is clean. The architecture is sound. The bad news is that her credentials were the authentication route for 11 critical systems. She was the designated signing authority on every federal-facing document we've submitted in the last 4 years. Without her active designation, we can't certify, we can't renew, and we can't legally represent our security posture to any client or agency." He paused. "In plain terms, we can keep the lights on, we just can't prove to anyone that the building is safe." The founder closed his eyes. The COO, who had been standing near the window looking out at the San Jose skyline with an expression that had been slowly changing for several hours, said quietly, "Can we at least log into the system she built?" Tom looked at him. "With what credentials?" Nobody answered. At 3:45 p.m., the Department of Defense Contract Office sent a formal notice. Their language was measured, institutional, and absolutely devastating. Due to lapsed authorization status and absence of a verified FedRAMP system owner,
All deliverables under the current contract were suspended pending compliance review. The estimated value of that contract, $14 million annually. The founder read the notice standing up. He didn't sit down after reading it. He just stood there for a long moment, holding the paper, then very quietly asked the room to clear out. Tuesday morning. The founder's office looked like a late night in a grad school library. 3 empty coffee cups, a half-eaten energy bar on the windowsill, a throw blanket over the back of the chair, evidence that at some point he had stopped going home. He'd been going through archives since midnight. At 7:42 a.m., he found it. A document dated 18 months ago. Title, Security Authorization Continuity Risk, Executive Summary for Leadership Review. Author, Chen. He read it, the way you read something you wished you'd read before. The memo was 12 pages, clear, methodical, almost maddeningly precise. It described in exact detail what would happen if the company's sole FedRAMP-designated system owner were to leave without a structured authorization transfer. It outlined the federal timeline for reauthorization. It named every contract that would be affected. It included a section titled, What Leadership Should Understand About This Role, written in plain language that even a McKinsey consultant could follow. At the bottom, a line in bold. This framework cannot be overwritten by internal HR or executive decision. Reassignment of this designation without federal coordination constitutes automatic authorization lapse and potential breach of contract under current federal procurement rules. Beneath that, a note in Maya's clean, precise font. I have raised this in Q1 and Q3 reviews. If leadership requires a formal briefing, I am available.
The suspension covered everything. Their FedRAMP authorization, their GSA vendor status, their entry in the federal procurement database, their ability to submit proposals, renew contracts, or certify their security posture to any government-adjacent client. Diana read it aloud in the boardroom. When she finished, the room was quiet, the way rooms are when people are doing the math and not liking the answer. The CEO looked at the COO. The COO looked at his hands. One of the board members, who had joined by video call and immediately regretted it, leaned toward his camera. When you say suspended, you mean temporarily, right? Like a paperwork issue? Diana looked at the screen. I mean suspended until a qualified, federally registered system owner completes the reauthorization process, which takes a minimum of 60 days, during which we cannot legally represent our security compliance to any federal client. How many of our contracts are federal or federal adjacent? The board member asked. The CFO pulled up a spreadsheet. He looked at it for a moment. About 63% of our annual recurring revenue. The board member sat back. 63%. The COO finally spoke. His voice had lost its previous velocity. Can we get Maya back, even just for the reauthorization? We pay her, she signs what needs to be signed, we're back on track. Diana slid a paper across the table. Maya's disassociation notice. She filed this with 3 federal agencies before 9 a.m. Monday. We'd need her to formally withdraw it and reinstate her designation with the jab. That's her choice to make, and so far, she's made it. The board member on the video call rubbed his forehead. Has anyone tried actually talking to her? Not a company call, personally. The founder nodded. I'll try. By Wednesday morning, the company's internal systems began failing in sequence, not because Maya had broken anything, because she had been the only one who knew how everything was connected, and without her, the connections were quietly coming undone. The SOC 2 compliance dashboard went dark first. Without an active system owner credential, it defaulted to a locked audit state. Nobody could generate a compliance report, update a control, or respond to a client audit request. The Zero Trust Policy Console went next. Access permissions across 7 internal applications began returning authorization errors. Engineers started getting locked out of tools they used every day. It wasn't a hack, it was entropy. The system doing exactly what Maya had built it to do, requiring authorization that no longer existed. By 9 a.m., The customer success team was fielding panicked messages from 3 enterprise clients whose security integrations had gone silent overnight. The integrations were fine. The monitoring certificates that confirmed they were fine had expired without renewal because renewal required Maya's signing authority. Tom from engineering stood in the middle of the open office floor and said quietly, but loud enough for the 10 people nearby to hear, "She didn't build it to fail. She built it to require her, and none of us ever asked why." At 10:30, the COO tried to hold a company all-hands. He opened with, "I want to address some concerns about our current infrastructure transition." He got approximately 90 seconds in before the head of legal walked up, stood next to him, and said simply, "I'd recommend we stop talking publicly until we've spoken to counsel." The COO closed his laptop. He didn't say much after that. The client cancellations came in steadily through the afternoon. Not angry messages, professional notices, the kind generated by legal teams and vendor management systems, each one citing the same clause in the same kind of contract language. Failure to maintain continuous security authorization constitutes a material breach. By 4 p.m., engineering had identified 43 systems that required active authorization to operate at full function. They had full access to 6. The CFO ran the numbers and then put his laptop face down on his desk and sat very still for a while. At 4:59 p.m., the COO submitted his resignation by email. No all hands, no farewell Slack message, just a 1-paragraph note to the founder and CEO that used the phrase, "pursuing other opportunities," twice in 4 sentences. Nobody replied. The founder called her at 5:31 p.m. on Wednesday. He had tried 3 times before. This time, after 2 rings, she picked up. "Maya." His voice was quiet. Not the founder voice, just a man who was tired. "Daniel." She didn't sound surprised. A long pause. He was quiet, long enough that she didn't fill it, just waited. "I found the memo," he said finally. She said nothing. "And the one in Q1, and the one in Q3. He exhaled. "You documented everything." "I always documented everything," she said. "That was my job." Another pause. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm not asking on behalf of the company. I'm asking because I need to understand." He swallowed. "Did you design this way on purpose? The architecture, the authorization chain? Were you building something that couldn't survive without you?" Maya was quiet for a moment. When she answered, her voice wasn't cold, it wasn't triumphant, it was just honest. "I built it to be secure. The federal standards require a single point of accountability. That's not my design. That's the JAB framework. I told you that, multiple times. What I built was the safest version of what you needed. It required one thing to work properly. A beat. A company that understood what it had." He didn't say anything. "You didn't disable it," he said finally. It wasn't really a question. "No," she said. "I just took my name off it." The line was quiet. "Maya, Daniel," she said, not unkindly, "get a good federal compliance attorney. Start the JAB reauthorization today. Brief your board honestly. And next time someone hands you a 12-page memo with a red flag in the subject, read it." She paused. "Good luck." She hung up. The founder sat in his office for a long time after that. Outside, the last light was going down over the Santa Clara Valley, the whole sprawl of it lit up like a circuit board, all those companies running their systems, their authorizations, their invisible architectures held together by people whose names most executives couldn't remember. He picked up Maya's credential card from the tray on his desk, turned it over, read the title again. Authorized System Owner, FedRAMP Designated Representative. He set it back down. She hadn't burned the infrastructure. She hadn't locked them out. She hadn't done anything except leave, quietly and completely, and take her name with her. And that had been enough. Because it turned out that the firewall wasn't the software.
It was never the software, it was Maya Chen, and they had optimized her right out the door. By Thursday morning, 3 board members had retained personal legal counsel. A 4th had begun quietly exploring whether the COO's unilateral decision to eliminate the role constituted a breach of fiduciary duty. The company was still standing, the lights still worked, the Slack was still open. But the heart of it, the thing that stood between their code and every threat that wanted inside, was gone, and it wasn't coming back. Maya Chen didn't need to watch it fall. She already knew how the story ended. She'd written the risk assessment. Thanks for writing this out with me. If you're still here, you're the kind of person who actually reads the memo. Hit subscribe so you never miss when these stories drop, and share this with someone who thinks IT is just a cost center.